Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're really getting into it, unpacking the story of the most destructive weapon ever created and, all the events that led to it actually being used. So let's start the story, but not at the beginning. No, let's start at the exact moment the world changed forever. August 6th, 1945. A single American bomb unleashes the power of the universe itself over the city of Hiroshima. And just like that, the atomic age had begun. I mean, think about that phrase, a bottomless wound in the living conscience of the race. That's how one writer put it, really capturing that profound shock. But to truly understand how we got to that point, we have to go back. Back to the one scientific discovery that kicked this whole thing off. All right, Section 1, a new kind of weapon. It really did all start with this breakthrough in physics, a discovery that frankly unlocked a new and terrifying kind of power, and it sparked this desperate race against time. So what are we talking about here? Fission. In January 1939, a couple of German scientists, Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann, they discover it. But the key insight, right, the part that changed everything, came from people like Lise Meitner and Enrico Fermi. They realized this process could create a self-sustaining chain reaction. And that possibility? It absolutely terrified the scientists who'd already fled Nazi Germany because they knew exactly what that could mean. And you gotta understand, news of this discovery just spread like wildfire through the physics community. The big fear, the one keeping everyone up at night, was that Hitler's Germany would build this weapon first. And I mean, they had just seized Czechoslovakia's uranium reserves, so it wasn't some far-fetched idea. That fear, that's what led to a pretty fateful letter being written to President Roosevelt. So how much did the U.S. government kick in to start? $6,000. Seriously. It seems almost unbelievable when you look back, right? But that little bit of seed money was what would grow into the largest scientific and industrial project in all of history. So now we're at the secret Manhattan Project. What started as this, small research committee, it escalated, and it escalated fast. It became a top secret national priority. It was a race against a potential Nazi bomb, and it had a code name, the Manhattan Project. Okay, let's just pause and think about the scale here, because it was absolutely staggering. We're talking about entire towns, like Oak Ridge, Tennessee, built from nothing, completely in secret. Over 100,000 people were working on this thing. And get this, most of them had no clue what the final product was. All of that secrecy, all of that effort, was for one single goal: build the bomb before the enemy. All right, on to the Trinity test, the terrifying dawn of the nuclear age. So by the summer of '45, things had changed. Germany was defeated, but the war in the Pacific was still raging. The scientists out at the secret lab in Los Alamos, they had two workable bomb designs. But one of them, it was so radical, so out there, that they had to test it. They just had no way of knowing if it would even work. So the team basically had these two competing paths to the bomb. The first one, they called it the gun method. It was way simpler, pretty much a sure thing. But, and this is a big but, it needed the world's very limited supply of enriched uranium. The second path used plutonium, which was more available. It was this super complex implosion design. Now, this one would be a far more efficient weapon, but it was so complex that it absolutely positively had to be tested. So what did they tell the public? Well, the official U.S. Army press release said a remotely located ammunition magazine exploded, but there was no loss of life or limb. I mean, that has to be the understatement of the century, right? Because the reality was something else entirely. Okay, so check this out. At 5:29 in the morning, July 16th, 1945, this plutonium device, they nicknamed it the Gadget. It detonated. It unleashed a power nobody had ever seen on Earth. It vaporized a 100-foot steel tower, turned the desert sand underneath it to glass, and sent a mushroom cloud soaring 40,000 feet into the sky. The test was a terrifying success. So now we get to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, deploying this new weapon. The test was a success. An Allied invasion of Japan was on the table, and it was promising just immense, staggering casualties on both sides. So President Truman, And remember, he had only just learned about the bomb's existence after FDR died. He made the decision to use it.
So, the mission was on. The primary target was Hiroshima. Now, it was chosen for a reason. It had significant military value, it was the headquarters of the Japanese Second Army, and its layout was pretty compact. The B-29, the Enola Gay, piloted by Colonel Paul Tibbets, flew the mission, and it was executed flawlessly.
And the result was just unimaginable devastation. The temperature at ground zero hit an estimated 7,000 degrees Celsius in a fraction of a second. Around 70,000 people died instantly. The bomb actually exploded directly over a hospital. 2/3 of the city just gone. The tail gunner on the Enola Gay, he was the only crew member to see the blast head on, and he later said it was like a peep into hell. But Japan didn't surrender. Then, the Soviet Union declares war on Japan. So just 3 days after Hiroshima, a second mission was launched. The original target was a city called Kokura, but it was covered by clouds. So the plane, the Bockscar, diverted to its secondary target, Nagasaki. This time, it was the plutonium Fat Man bomb, the one they tested. It was actually even more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb, but the hilly terrain around Nagasaki kind of contained the blast. It meant fewer instant deaths, but the destruction was still absolutely catastrophic. Okay, so let's talk about the aftermath and the legacy. The 1-2 punch of the two bombings, combined with the Soviets invading Manchuria, well, it had its intended effect. It finally forced a decision that had been completely deadlocked among Japan's leadership. Understanding how these weapons actually killed people is just staggering. The initial reports broke it down for Hiroshima. 60% of the immediate deaths were from burns, just the sheer heat. Another 30% were from falling debris and the blast wave itself. And then, the last 10%, that was from the invisible killer, radiation. So, on August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito himself finally intervened. He cited what he called a new and most cruel bomb. And for the very first time in history, the people of Japan actually heard their emperor's voice. His radio address announced their unconditional surrender. And just like that, the most destructive war in human history was over. But the story doesn't end there, does it? The legacy of these bombs is incredibly complex. You have the human tragedy of the survivors, the hibakusha, which led to this invaluable decades-long study on the effects of radiation. On the geopolitical side, there's a real argument that the bombs may have prevented a Soviet invasion and occupation of northern Japan. And today, both Hiroshima, with its iconic atomic bomb dome, and Nagasaki have transformed. They've become these powerful global centers for peace and the anti-nuclear weapons movement. So that leaves us with this final question, right? The bomb ended the war, but it began the nuclear age. What is its ultimate legacy? The events of 1945, they settled one massive conflict, but they left all of humanity with this profound, permanent question about our own capacity for self-destruction. And that question, it still echoes today, from those secret labs of the Manhattan Project all the way to the halls of power. It's a legacy that really all of us are still living with.